will get the recording. And I would like to thank you for joining this webinar. It's presented this morning by the New York State Association of Counties, NYSAC, and the New York State Hospitality and Tourism Association, NYSTA. And I'd like to begin, unfortunately, Stephen Aquario, NYSAC's Executive Director and General Counsel, could not be with us this morning, but the leadership he provided during this process is something that I certainly wanted to recognize. And in his place this morning is Ryan Gregoire, and he's NYSAC's Legislative Director. If you'd like to say a few words, Ryan.
Well, thanks, Mark, and good morning, everyone. Again, Stephen apologizes for not being able to be here. He unexpectedly had a death in the family, but I wanted to take a moment to not only thank the members, but certainly thank the president of the New York State County Executives Association, Jason Garner, the Broome County executive, for his leadership, as well as the members across the state. And certainly none of this would have been possible without our legislative champions in the Senate and in the Assembly, now in the Senate, Senator Hinchey and Senator Pat Fahey, along with our partnership and very close working relationship with NYSTA, Mark Dorr, and Deb Stevens and Beth Garvey. Together, I don't think any of this would have been possible without all of us working in very close tandem to one another. So for the county members who are on today's webinar, thank you for joining us. This is just the first discussion really of what is shaping up to be a transformational piece of legislation that is going to have a significant lasting impact on our state, hopefully on our country. And honestly, this is a first stab at something that we're looking to implement across the globe. Really, no one has gone as far as New York State has with this new law. So we're all pioneers in this fight together, and we look forward to working with you all. So again, Mark, thank you for all of your work and all of your advocacy, and of course your members as well.
Sure. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you very much. Yeah, this was a real collaborative effort across vast areas, tourism, the counties and government. And this morning, I know there's a great deal of interest. We have several hundred people on this session, but we're going to learn about the new short-term rental law and really its impact on the state's economy, tax collection, and ultimately the registration process, which is going to make all of this work. We're going to discover how the law creates a level playing field for the tourism industry and ensures that counties receive the tax revenues from, as we all know, the previously unregulated $1 billion short-term rental industry. And that's just outside of New York City. We have an all-star list of panelists that will be coming up soon. They're going to focus on, among other things, the background and overview of the law, how state, local, and the taxes, the mechanism how they're actually going to be collected, the implementation timeline. What you're looking for is how long we have to get some of these set up, and really how the registration process will work and how it has changed from being a statewide registration to being conducted at the county level. So I'm going to do my best to manage the chat. If you have a question as we go through, please put it into the chat. We're going to keep this to an hour. As Ryan said, this is first of multiple sessions that we're going to have, some in person, some more on webinars. Everybody will receive a copy of this recording. And so right now, Ryan mentioned our two champions that we had, and none of this could have been possible without the leadership of Senator Michelle Hinchey and also Senator Pat Fahey, who is our new senator. She took this bill and got it done while she was in the Assembly. She has now moved over to the Senate, so they're now Senate colleagues. But we're going to have both of them just kind of say a few words, and I know that they've received many thank yous from both the counties and the tourism industry, but I would like to First introduce Senator Michelle Hinchy, and if not for her and Pat, we would not be sitting here today. So I asked Michelle to say a few words.
Hi, thank you, Mark. And hello, everyone. Good morning. It's really a pleasure to be here and hopefully with everyone, to be celebrating this really monumental change. Getting this bill done really took a team effort. And I think this is exactly and exemplifies exactly how government is supposed to work. We worked together. We made sure we worked with the organizations, many of you who are directly impacted. We work with our local governments, with our counties, with our towns, with our cities across the board. We really worked with everyone to make sure that we were bringing forward the challenges that existed in our communities. As Mark said, in a billion-dollar industry that is been left kind of completely unregulated. And what we had seen really was our short-term rental platforms choosing and hoping to stay scrappy tech startups without the acknowledgement that they've really grown into a big part of the tourism and hospitality industry, not to mention the impacts that they've had in the housing market across many of our communities, especially mine in the Hudson Valley. For those who don't know me, I'm the senator for the 41st District. I represent Columbia County, Greene County, about half of Ulster County, and Northern Dutchess. And really helping our local municipalities get a handle of the scope and the scale of short-term rentals has been critical. And it's been a really sometimes difficult, but a really rewarding effort to work with so many people on this call. I want to shout out my home county executive, Executive Jen Metzger, who was really helpful in bringing her local experience to the table when we kind of shifted from the statewide model to the county-run model. But this is a big step forward. We will, for the first time, get transparency from these short-term rental platforms at the scale and scope of their market. We know that taking housing off the market is one of the reasons why our housing costs have increased. We also know that they have not been paying their fair share of taxes, which is really important for our local communities to help invest in first responder services and infrastructure services, even possibly the creation of more housing, just to name a few. And so to be able to have now a dedicated funding stream in the sales and occupancy taxes for the counties that remain opted in to this program will, I think, be transformative. One Flag, as many of you know, only one of the short-term rental platforms even made kind of voluntary agreements on sales to collection. But if you didn't have an occupancy tax in your county, you couldn't even go into that voluntary agreement. The challenge, even if you could, though, is that there was no data sharing. There was no transparency. So our counties were really at the whim of what these platforms would say they had, how many short-term rentals they had. And so they could say, here's $200,000, take it or leave it. And we know that there's a lot more than that's owed to our communities. And so really, I want to say a big thank you to the entire coalition for working on this bill. Anytime we are trying to change an industry that's become pretty entrenched, really at their own, or for their own gain and for their own momentum and for their own wallets, it's a big change. But we fought on behalf of our communities, and it's been a great really wonderful and kind of encapsulation, as I said, of how we all can work together. And I want to give a big shout out to, at the time, Assembly Member Pat Fahey, now my wonderful colleague who sits next to me in the chamber. It's been a pleasure to move this through both houses and to get the second floor on board. And so thank you, everyone. We're here. Many questions will be answered today, but we're here to answer any as well. And I see some of my local supervisors on the call. We've sent some information out, but feel free to always reach out to us if we can be helpful. And thank you all so much for your partnership.
Thank you, Senator Hinchy. Really appreciate and value all the work that you and your staff have done over the past many years since you took on the mantle of helping us to get this through on the Senate side. And now I'd like to turn it over to Senator Fahey, who I will say, I don't know whether it was 8, 9, or 10 years ago, but she has been with us on this in the assembly since the first day the bill was introduced. She was our first sponsor, and to see all of this come together while she was still in the assembly, I think is a great thing, and like to have her welcome her here and have her say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, all. Thank you, Senator Hinchey, as well. What an amazing partner, and what extraordinary energy she picked up or that she gave to this bill a few years ago when she joined the state Senate. And I'm so proud to be sitting next to her. Mark, yes, I think it was 7, almost 8 years now when I first got interested in this issue, because I was watching the trends, and we saw in conversations with you and others, we saw that there was not a level playing field here. And as we know, just the occupancy tax alone is what funds our tourism offices at the county and local level. And that just seemed, that alone really got me going, because the tourism is our second, I think our second biggest industry here, and just as vital to upstate as it is to New York City. So the lack of a level playing field on occupancy taxes and sales taxes, at that time, there were serious safety concerns. To their credit, the short-term rental industry has addressed a number of those, although I'd say there's still a little work to do, but that was addressed. And then the idea of really trying to get a sense of what is going on in this industry. And that became a motivator with again, a registry. And because transparency, this is what they call the short-term rental market is really part of that disruptive economy, just as we've learned with the transportation networks like Uber and Lyft. And government kind of struggles to keep up with this. So as Senator Hinchey said, it just became completely unregulated post-COVID or during COVID. This became an investor industry of choice. And there are now, it's now a multi-billion-dollar industry. And as was already said, it is generating almost $1 billion of industry annually, $1 billion of revenue annually, and that's outside New York City. That's just the rest of New York State. And we were estimated to be leaving, again, depending on how you look at the numbers, we were estimated to be leaving $100 million a year in sales tax and occupancy tax. And it just wasn't fair to the hotel, motel industries, but most importantly to those vital tourism offices that are doing so much to make sure we grow the tourism industry overall. So just more on the shout outs. I mentioned Mark, thank you, Mark. NYSAC, during the waning days when we were in panic mode on this right before Christmas, when the bill was signed that Saturday evening, Ryan Gregor, who you'll hear a little bit more from as well on the panel, I think, but with NYSAC, he pulled out a resolution that was passed by NYSAC in 2014. So you had me beat on that. You had this ahead of time, but that's how critical the support of Mark and the entire hotel motel industry and tourism industry, as well as NYSAC. A shout out as well to the Association of Towns, the Conference of Mayors and more. And I would be remiss as well if I didn't give a thanks to Michelle's county executive, Jen Metzger, who had the bill when she was in the Senate, who had joined me on the bill, and then became so helpful in the waning days when we were still trying to get this done. We've made some significant compromises, but we still accomplished a core principle of that in bringing transparency to this industry. And that's what we really need, because we know, I love this stat from Greene County alone. It's, while it's a smaller county, and I don't represent Greene County, but it's just one stat that right now in, the last studies that were done in 2022, the rental stock the short-term rentals accounted for almost 45% of their rental stock. That's just a stunning number in a small county. And we know we have a housing crisis throughout this country, let alone throughout the state. So really getting some transparency here is going to help us really address some of the overall housing crisis that we are facing. And as was mentioned earlier, this is groundbreaking legislation. This was very much a David Goliath fight to really try to get some transparency. No one is putting short-term rentals out of business. It is really an effort to level a playing field and get the very needed transparency in what is going on in our increasingly tight housing market. So this is, it is groundbreaking. No other state has done this. A lot of other states are looking to us, and the counties will now be able to take the lead on this. And it's extraordinary to see the participation on this in this meeting today. I hope we have plenty more. And again, none of this would have happened without the work of you. And I'm sure I've not mentioned numerous other groups that have played a part in this. So I'm really grateful. This is probably one of the most significant bills I have done in my 12 years in the Assembly, and look forward to doing more in the Senate with Michelle Hinchy and more. Thank you again for all you've done here to get us here.
Thank you, Pat. I just wanted to echo what you said. Since this bill got to its conclusion, at least 6 other states have called our office and said, listen, how can we get this going in the right direction? What did you guys need to do in New York State? And the one thing I tell you, and it's not just because you're on the call, Senator Fahey and Senator Hinchy, I said, listen, the first thing you have to do is make sure you have the right champions in the right place at the right time. And you start there, which we really have had. And I just wanted to, again, echo the thanks that everybody on this call has for your leadership in the Senate
Mark,
and the Assembly.
And Mark, can I just, their faces are on the screen. Deb Stevens, I felt like we were talking at midnight every night for a while there. And Beth Garvey, what they did was absolutely instrumental. And, so I would be remiss. I mentioned the hotel and tourism industry, your NYSAC, but what Greenberg Torek did in representing all of you was amazing, as well as NYSAC. So it just, in the end, it was a small team going around the clock to get this passed. And I really feel like we, an amazing David versus Goliath effort, and so proud of all of this. So thank you again to everyone.
Great. Thank you, Senator. And yes, there's hundreds of people on this call, and so probably all of them had some part during the course of time to get us to where we ended. So it's really has been an industry-wide, statewide effort. But now, as you see, we are going to get into the bill details and how we arrived at the point that we're at today. And to discuss this, we have Elizabeth Garvey from the legal lobby firm Greenberg Traurig. They are our legal lobby firm. They represent us and they make all of us look good all the time. Ryan Gregoire, the legislative director, who you heard from the New York State Association of Counties, and also Deb Stevens from Greenberg Traurig. And I'll just kind of set the stage a little bit here. Beth is going to talk about kind of the differences between the June bill that passed and the final bill the law that we have now, and how we can kind of meet those standards and the implementation of it. Ryan's going to talk a lot about the registration framework and the collection of those sales taxes, how it will flow, and the counties will ultimately get their money. And then Deb is going to touch on the occupancy tax issues for all of our convention and visitors bureaus and our destination marketing organizations, what they need to be aware of as these changes take place to their local laws, and how to be an advocate to get that done. So enough from me. I will now turn it over to Beth Garvey from Greenberg Traurig.
Thanks so much for that, Mark. And thank you, Senator Fahey and Senator Hinchy, for those kind words as well. We just want to start with laying out some of the procedural aspects of where we are right now in the process. So the short-term rental legislation that was passed in June was signed by the governor, which again was a great victory, but she signed it with an approval memo indicating that there was a chapter amendment agreed to. So for those on the call who aren't familiar, a chapter amendment takes an existing law and makes changes to it. And essentially, it's an agreement between the Senate, Assembly, and the governor's office, all holding hands and agreeing that they will make certain changes to the legislation, which is a condition of the governor signing that bill. So it's become more in fashion over time. We see sometimes up to hundreds of these chapter amendments every year. And what you see is in 2025 now, you have Senate Bill 820 that has been introduced by Senator Hinchey. We're awaiting a sponsor in the state assembly, but we will see a sponsor for a companion bill to that. And once that bill is passed and signed by the governor, that will form the new short-term rental legislation. So what is in effect now? As of right now, the chapter of the laws that was passed in June was not effective for 120 days. So that will not take effect until April of 2025. What will happen in the interim is Senate Bill 820 by Senator Hinchey and its new future companion bill in the assembly will pass both houses and be signed by the governor. That chapter amendment contains in section 25 a provision that amends that effective date, which will kick it out 275 days after enactment, which is September 22nd, 2025. So as of right now, we have a good long stretch of time starting now to absorb the requirements of Senate Bill 820 and get ourselves all set in order to be ready to hit the ground running as of September 22nd, so this coming fall. So the chapter law contained most notably a statewide registry. So what that would have required would have been every short-term rental host working with the booking services to provide a whole slew of data and pay a registration fee to the New York State Department of State. One of the aspects that the governor had significant concerns with would be the amount of labor and infrastructure that would need to be created at the state level in order to achieve the goals of the bill. In the chapter amendment, Senate Bill 820, that is now going to require each county to create a registry. It allows counties to opt out of creating a registry if they choose. If they opt out, a local government can choose to create their own, meaning cities, towns, and villages. It will also allow counties notably to work together to create multi-county registries. And again, there is a fee that is allowed to be assessed. That was true under both the chapter law and again, continuing through the chapter amendment that will allow them to have the fee for the actual and necessary expenses associated with creating, maintaining, and ultimately enforcement of the registry. As we mentioned a little bit earlier, counties will have an opportunity to opt out of the registration requirement. If they choose to do that, they will have until the later of, and this is a slight edit, the later of December 31st, 2025, or 9 months following the enactment. So that will put local counties in a position to need to opt out on or before, I believe it's June 22nd, 2026. So that opt-out period is going to run from September 22nd till the end of June 2026. And then thereafter, a county can still opt back in if they choose to, but they will no longer have the option to opt out. Within the city of New York, I think this also bears mentioning, City of New York Mayor's Office of Special Enforcement, their structure will continue unmodified by this legislation. So there will not be any changes to that New York City system. And again, what we talk about is what that impact of the opt-out means. And essentially, it means that the counties are not going to receive any occupancy tax for those short-term rentals that occur within their jurisdiction. Regardless if they opt out or not, they will receive their local sales tax share. That would be distributed in the same manner as the current sales tax distributions that are contained in the state enactments there. A county with an occupancy tax will only receive that tax if the occupancy tax allows the collection of occupancy taxes related to short-term rentals. So for instance, Ulster County, just this past session, passed into law an expansion of their occupancy tax to cover those types of accommodations. And at this point, I was going to turn it over to Deb Stevens to cover the remainder of the new registration process.
Thanks, Beth. And I just wanted to say thank you again to Senator Hinchey and Senator Fahey for your kind words. It was just terrific working with the both of you throughout this whole very long process. So I'm just going to touch actually on the last couple of points here on the summary of the chapter amendment provisions. And then I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, who's going to walk through the registration component for the county. So I just wanted to point out that to follow up on what Beth was saying, the chapter amendment allows for counties to adopt a local law for collecting occupancy taxes if they don't currently have a bed tax statute on the books that allows for STRs, for collection of occupancy taxes on STRs. So they can just go ahead and pass a local law that would allow for that without getting a state bill. Currently, they would have to go through the process of getting passing a local law, getting a state version of that passed as well. So this bill would allow for them to go ahead and get that local law done without state authorization. So just that that point there, just wanted to mention that. And then importantly, the data sharing component in the bill, the platforms are required to provide data on short-term rentals. So the length of stays and some additional information to the counties every 90 days. The counties then are required to share that data with local governments within 60 days and upon request if they do not do that. The booking services must collect and report the data regardless of whether or not a muni has a registry. So the law is very clear that the booking services have to go ahead and collect and report that data. And the booking services also have to report aggregate data, so the number of stays to the Department of State every 90 days. So that information, again, it's not going to be as detailed as the information that is going to be housed by the municipalities, including the counties, but rather aggregate data on the number of stays that the booking services have for that period of 90 days. So that's going to be there. And also importantly, I think it's worth mentioning that there won't be any disclosure of, the public will not be able to access the information that is held by the counties. So that information on the number of stays and addresses will not be disclosed to the public. So the registration portion, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, who's going to walk through what the chapter amendment now requires and the differences there.
Yeah, thank you, Deb, and thank you, Beth, for that initial overview up to this point. And thank you to Senator Fahey and Senator Hinchey for, again, all the kind words. It's been an honor to work with both of you. So with regard to the registration, and I just want to take a step back for 1 second and say that this applies to the counties that have not passed a local law to opt out. So these are what's going to be called a covered jurisdiction, meaning you've said, we're going to do the registry, we're going to proceed for, down this path. So for those counties, an owner has to either self-comply with the requirements on their own individually to the county, or through their booking service, if they're using a booking service like VRBO, Expedia, Airbnb, etc., they can facilitate that connection back to the county. And what I mean by that is for an individual host to go on and list their house for sale, for someone to rent out, they're going to have a registration number, and they're going to have to get that registration number from the county under these covered jurisdictions. That's what the county's responsibility is going to be. That host is going to have to go to the platform and enter in that corresponding registration number. Without that, they're not going to be permitted under this new law to host their current facility. For situations where people are violating the terms of this new registry requirement, there are penalties that can be assessed. It's not a mandate that they're assessed, but the county can, after the third violation, assess a $200 fee on the host, and for each subsequent violation, that fine increases to $500. Booking agencies can also be fined up to $500 per day per violation, and the counties have the authority under this law to work with the Attorney General for that enforcement component. The counties also, under this new law, have the authority to assess a fee for the operation maintenance of their registry. So, for example, let's say Delaware County decides we're going to proceed with a registry, and they choose to operate with a third-party vendor to do this because they don't want to do it internally. They want to set up the registry with a company who can help them, and they're out there, that there's a couple of different options there. Let's say the company comes back and says it's going to cost on an annual basis for Delaware County $120,000 to purchase and maintain and operate their registry. They can take that cost and assess a fee to the host and booking platforms to cover that cost. So you don't have to use your sales tax and occupancy tax revenue to offset the cost of maintaining a registry. Now that was really important that I wanted to know. Go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so Beth had covered this up front, but just to reiterate here, the counties will have to pass a local law to opt out of the program. Not a resolution, it has to be a local law. There was some confusion because earlier drafts had a resolution as an option. It has to be a local law. And as Beth had noted, they will have the authority to do so until June 22nd, 2026. They can, though, repeal that local law, opting back in whenever they want. So let's say, there's some hesitation out of the gate. You decide to pass a local law, opting out of this, you can always opt back into the program. I also want to say, for the local governments who are on the call, towns, city, villages, you still have the authority. If you have a registry on the books right now, nothing changes. You're still permitted to maintain that registry and do the enforcement provisions. As Deb had just noted, the county will be required to provide data down to you. So if there's a code enforcement issue, you will have that data on that short-term rental to do your code enforcement violation procedure. The other thing to note here is if a county opts out of the registry, You as a local government have the authority to implement and restrict short-term rentals, set up a registry on your own. You have that local authority. We did not, and the Senate sponsors did not want to have any negative impact on local governments. We wanted to make sure that you're still able to operate in the manner in which you would like to do so, to preserve your home rule authority. So again, just to recap for the counties, because I've got a lot of calls on this already. If you do not participate, if you pass a local law opting out of this registry, you will not be permitted, you will not receive short-term rental occupancy tax. Okay? For individuals who are not using a booking platform, and there apparently is 137 booking platforms out there. But for folks who are not using that, let's say you just list your property on Facebook Marketplace, for example, you will still be required, if your county has a registry, to go and get a registration number, and you as an individual will have to collect the occupancy tax and the sales tax. You're going to have to remit the occupancy tax to the county, and you're going to have to remit the sales tax to Department of Tax and Finance. It's going to be, a burden on those hosts who elect not to participate in a booking service. For counties on the sales tax piece, you're going to get this sales tax revenue just as you would any other vendor. State Tax and Finance is going to receive those receipts, and they're going to share it down with you just as you do, receive your regular sales tax payment. On occupancy tax, the booking service, the booking platform will remit those to the county through the regular occupancy tax procedure. I think that's all I have at this point. I don't know, Beth, Deb, if you have anything that I may have missed that you want to climb onto here.
I would just add one other point on the penalty structure. So this does provide a series of warnings. So in other words, if I'm a host and I'm renting out my property, neighbors complain, you go out, investigate, you have to give them 2 warnings before you can impose a penalty. However, I would just also want to clarify, there are provisions in here that talk about wherever the short-term rental unit is located, you still retain really a plenary authority to enforce your health and safety laws, other local codes related to short-term rentals, related to health and safety of persons within the county. Any of those types of regulations or requirements really sit on top of the short-term rental law. And so those should also be, viewed by your code inspectors as also available to you to complete the package of enforcement options.
Thank you, Beth. Yes, great point on all of that.
I do have a couple of things briefly to add on the occupancy tax piece. So the chapter amendment is very clear that it's not just the counties that are allowed to go ahead and enact a local law to collect occupancy tax on short-term rentals without state authorization or without a separate state bill. That the cities, towns, villages that have a separate occupancy tax can also go ahead and do that. So I just wanted to make that point. And also, importantly, it is not automatic, and this is really for the CVBs that are on the call, just to really impress upon you that this is not, the collection of occupancy taxes on short-term rentals is not automatic. If you do not have a if your law doesn't explicitly say so already, which I don't believe many do. I know Ulster County just passed a law that does apply to short-term rentals, but for the majority of the CVBs, you will have to be proactive and engage with your local elected officials and to get a law passed. So that's just something to start thinking about as we enter the new year.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
what that means for the counties is you're gonna have to go in and amend your local law if it doesn't include short-term rentals to include short-term rentals. All this state bill grants is the ability to do that at the local level. You don't, to Deb's point, you don't have to go back to the state to say, oh, you know, I need a state bill to do this. But you do have to do it through a local law. You have to amend your local law.
But
So
you will
Deb-
need a state bill. Sorry, Mark, just quickly, you will need the extension of your existing bed tax law will happen in the same form and manner that it always has. So if it expires on 3 years, you know, you will still need to get that home rule message and go ahead and do that. But for the short-term rental component of that, you will just have to do the local law. Sorry, Mark.
And so just to clarify on that local law, so if your occupancy tax says simply occupancy taxes are collected on hotels in the certain municipality, what they need to do is locally get the law to say hotels and short-term rentals. And then they're going to be okay going forward. They just have to get that local law passed, adding the STR language so it can start to be collected, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's really important that we make that clear because the original bill, so the bill that chaptered, it amended the definition of hotel in the occupancy tax law to include short-term rental. So it would have been sort of much more broad application of that. But this is quite different. So just
Yeah,
so
and I
we
would
remember.
Our CVB members, and a lot of them are on this call in the tourism promotion agencies that are connected at their local legislative level. That's a good thing that they're already involved because they are going to need to get that local law passed. So they should start working on that as soon as possible, just reaching out and say, here's the new law. This is something that we're going to need to have changed. But the great thing about it is it just has to be done locally. You don't need to have to go through the state to get that done.
Right. Or if an alternative is that when your bed tax statute is about to expire, you know, if you're actually coming up on that date, that's something to think about, that you could go in and amend the state law, the state bill to include that.
Right.
That would be another opportunity to do that.
Whichever's quicker.
I would just say for the municipalities, including the 3 counties that do not have occupancy tax laws on the book, you would still need to go to the state legislature to seek state legislative approval to create that. So I know Greene County's on the call, for example. For Greene County, this does not just give you blanket authority to start collecting occupancy tax. You still have to go to the state, and you would have to go and ask Senator Hinchey to introduce that bill for you to get that moving.
Yep. All right, so we want to take a stab at some of these questions that have been coming into the chat. I'll read them as they came in, and any of you 3 panelists can take these questions. But the first one is, how can we leverage the moment with this law to encourage counties where the majority of the occupancy tax, the taxes collected, do not go toward tourism, rather gets placed in the general fund? How can we, did you understand that question? A lot of times, some of these occupancy taxes come in and get funneled to other areas. Is this something where you would work within the local law to designate, here's the occupancy tax that comes in, this is where we want it to go?
Yes, that would be a negotiation between the CVB, TPA, and the county to make that determination for occupancy tax, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
And for purposes of a lot of the state laws, if you have questions about, you know, what's in your state law, let us know. We can point you to the right reference, but a lot of those have sort of, those state laws contain the formulaic distributions of those occupancy taxes.
One just quick follow-up, I just thought of this as well, a technical component to this. If you have, let's say, for example, you have a local occupancy tax at 4% and you want to go to 5.5% or something, you still need to go and seek state legislative approval to do that as well.
The next question is, it's several parts, but I will read it as it came in and we can digest it that way. My county, as of now, collects 5.5% for rentals under 30 days, the county, which is great. However, my town has restrictions on rentals under 30 days in their town code. There's a lack of hotels in our county and even more in our town, so STRs help the economy without a doubt. My question is, what is going to happen now with the town code as the county and town seem to contradict themselves?
Great example. Beth, do you want to take an initial stab here?
Well, yeah, so, really what the goal of this chapter amendment legislation was to sort of preserve status quo wherever there was a status quo. And so for a town that has said absolutely no short-term rentals are permitted, that town law, town code provision could continue to be enforced by the town. Those types of regulations are perfectly permissible. Nothing in this new legislation is going to let the county supersede that local legislation. Now, it's not to say that this legislation also prohibits that town from changing. The lack of any infrastructure to collect and remit sales tax or collect and remit the occupancy tax or to see a benefit really from these short-term rentals, I think really spurred a lot of those more restrictive requirements at that local level. So that town may say, we'd much rather have these exist now that there are some rules of the road and we're going to know where these are and know how to ensure the health and safety of, tourists in our area. They may repeal that, and that's also perfectly fine under the law.
I would add nothing. She nailed it.
All right. Let me see here. Next question says, will they be required to see if the STR operators are registered with the county or the state?
Yeah, so this is just county level. So again, there would not be a registry with the state. So if you call the state and ask, is this person registered? They're going to say, we don't know what you're talking about. Leave us alone. But once this law is again in effect, and we talked a little bit about the timeline we're looking at the earliest September 2025. Once someone is registered, it's going to be prohibited for a short-term rental platform to accept a booking without a valid registration. And you should also be able to contact the county for information about whether or not any particular location is registered. And that would also count if a town or village maintained their own registry as well.
On the registration, Ryan, I just wanted to kick it off to you a little bit because there's no firm answer, but we've gotten a lot of questions on, well, how are people going to set up the registration system? And that really is going to be, as I understand it, each county may approach it a little bit differently. There is no one size fits all on registration.
No, they're going to have to comply. Really, the system, when you boil it all down, right? First of all, they're going to have to comply with the new law that will be passed and signed into, Senate Bill 820. But what it really means is it's very flexible in how you set that up, Mark. I think a lot of counties that have more or less homegrown systems, as long as they comply with the new law, that's fine. That's permissible. Some other counties are going to look towards private sector solutions to help not only with registry creation and maintenance, but also with the data collection, with the data sharing, the hotel occupancy tax, and the sales tax process. There's solutions out there that allows kind of as much flexibility as the county wants to consider.
Yes, and the third party sort of structure I just wanted to also share is that there kind of would be two parts for the Convention and Visitors Bureaus and the counties, where if you have a system or you're working with a company that tracks short-term rental data and you're getting registrations in and you say, okay, well, that's not quite exactly how many we thought there were out there. They would then be able to tell the county, okay, well, here's who we have registered, but here's a 35% of the segment that's not registered that we know are doing business in your county, so they can go after those other 35%. So just to kind of, it might be two parts for some of the counties in registering and then going out and unearthing those who aren't registered with companies that have that data.
And I also wanted to just add to what Ryan just said, that counties now have an opportunity also to do shared services, so they can
Yes.
also join in a county that has an existing registry. Perhaps it's been in effect for a couple of years and it's working well. It's a well-oiled machine, and they might have concerns about whether it be their resources or their capability in creating that registry. They can go ahead and join another county's registry. So just wanted to point that out.
Sure.
And
The
those
next couple,
counties do not have to be contiguous. So
Right.
Lee County could work with Ulster County, for
Mhm.
example. They do not have to be contiguous geographically.
right, great points. Next one, will the booking platforms be required to collect occupancy tax and pay directly to the counties on behalf of, as we kind of covered this, on STR owners, similar to how the booking platforms would be mandated to collect New York State sales tax and remit directly to New York State?
That's correct.
Yep.
Yes. The answer is yes.
And we covered this, but I want to go over it again because it was a question here. What about those that don't use a service, but they do use the internet?
So they are going to be that they're going to have to comply with this law. So in that situation, if they continue to operate without a valid registration number, the county can take enforcement actions, or they can refer that to the Attorney General's office, and the AG's office can do so.
Will the state require the booking platforms to provide detail on STR data in a standardized format? Otherwise, if they will report in different formats, it might be difficult to manage.
Well, the answer to that one. Deb, Beth, do you?
I would think on this front, it is likely to be something that a county, in terms of interfacing with the booking service, could state, we want to receive it in particularly this format, whether it's, give us an Excel, give us, this format, you want to provide a template. There is, again, contained in the chapter amendment, a provision to authorize the county to create a registry for short-term booking services. And again, that's not something that every county is required to do, but understanding that there are, over 140 of these, that may be something that the county wants to do and impose the requirement in that way.
And I know the next couple we've been over, but again, I think it's important that we continue to go over it if we have additional questions. If a city within a county currently has a registry, will that city need to discontinue their registry if the county chooses to develop a registry?
Absolutely not.
No.
They certainly could at option discontinue and fold into the county, but they can maintain their existing registry.
Right. And can counties, Ryan, you covered this, can counties assess a fee for the registry? Yes.
Absolutely. Yep.
Let me just check here. The sales tax receipt from New York State,
Yes.
going to distinguish this separately from all other sales taxes?
I wish the answer was yes, but no, it's going to be part of your lump sales tax receipt from state tax and finance. So every county has a designee that has the ability to request individualized data from the state on sales tax. that individual in your county, it's usually a commissioner of finance, treasurer, CFO individual. They may be able to ask New York State, can you break out this quarterly payment to show me which vendors remitted? And then that would have to be a manual calculation done at the county level.
Great answer. Those voluntary tax agreements, which many of the TPAs have, what is the, if they, are those just going to expire? It's not a law. How does a county handle that? Although I do know that in some of the conversations we've had with some of the platforms, they said, well, we're no longer going to pay. And, the counties were like, okay, that's because we're going to be due much more money than we're currently getting. But how is that handled, those voluntary agreements?
They are a contract between the platform, and there's really only one platform, it's Airbnb that has these, and the county. And within those agreements, within those contractual agreements, there are force majeure clauses and the ability for either party to terminate those agreements. So that would play out between the booking service that has these VCAs and the county, and they could exercise their legal options through the contract process.
Okay.
And the bill is very clear, the chapter amendment's very clear that those agreements still stand. Nothing in the chapter amendment undoes any of that.
Right.
Okay. And we kind of covered that with those many counties already have contractual agreements for collection of taxes. So we just kind of covered that. Section 14 of the chapter amendment looked like it was removing the obligations of the booking services to collect and remit occupancy tax. Did you say that we'd automatically be receiving it like sales tax? Deb, do you want to go back to that one?
I think that was already asked, I believe, Ryan. You answered that, right? Booking services are going to be collecting and remitting.
Yes,
that's correct.
But if they're going to receiving the occupancy taxes, you've got to change your local law to then be getting that occupancy tax if it's not already in there on short-term rentals on the occupancy tax portion.
Correct.
Yes.
And if you already have short-term rentals in your local law, do you have to amend law to require that booking platforms collect occupancy tax and remit to counties?
No, other than I will say this statement, and this covers every remark I made, and Deb and Beth would probably agree with me. I am not a lawyer. I am not your county lawyer. So you need to cross-check with your county attorney's office, your local law to this new law, and make sure that the definition is accurate. Because you might have STR in your local law, but if it doesn't match the definition under the state law, I would assume you would need to tweak that, but.
And as many of these state laws as there are quirks in each one. So again, take a look at the language that you have. It may say a hotel or a motel. It may also include bed and breakfast. It may say beyond that, language. And so, what I would advise is just to dig out your enabling legislation, review it with your attorney. To the extent folks are not comfortable collecting and remitting under that law, look to get that fixed. But again, you may be fine, you may not be. There are just too many variations to go over here.
Yes.
Yep. And on the bed tax law, just a couple of questions that are here also. You can make that change at the local level. You don't need a state law in order to have that inserted.
Right.
As long as you already have an occupancy tax
Correct.
authority on the books, you can amend to include the STRs at the local level. Yes.
Can a county that already has a state enabling statute now pass a new local law that is inconsistent with that county's enabling statute?
So you are permitted, right? So if your state law says hotels and motels, this This legislation is giving you the authority to go in and say, hotel and motel include short-term rentals. And what this state law is effectively saying is that will be a permitted expansion of an existing authorization. It does not mean, however, that if your rate is 3% and you want to make it 8%, that you can just do that by local law.
This goes back to what I had said earlier about, that almost, not every, but I would say most of the bed tax statutes expire, whether it be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. You still need to go back to the state and have a bill introduced and pass that extension, as well as, to Beth's point, any sort of, increase in the tax or any other language that gets changed with regards to that statute.
Who will be responsible for ensuring that registered short-term rentals meet the health and safety standards set in the law, i.e. fire extinguishers?
The host will have to self-attest during the registration process that they meet the standards. Now, however, let's say someone who's visiting and has rented out that room says, gee, there wasn't any fire extinguishers, there's no egress, there's no fire alarms, there's no carbon dioxide. They could file that complaint with the county or the town, and the county and or town could go and inspect that potential violation and then go through the whole enforcement procedure that Beth had outlined. First and second notice of violation, and then the third, which is the fee, and or if you have an ordinance on the book, or if they are violating health and safety standards, you can go through and follow your current procedure on how to take enforcement action on those individuals.
Are counties automatically opted into the short-term registry if they do not opt out with this legislation?
Yes. Let me just look to confirm. They would be considered a coverage, yes, right? Deb and Beth, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have, within that time frame, they have to opt out. If they aren't within the definition of a, covered jurisdiction, then they would have the opportunity to opt out 9 months. So that's right.
How is the platform defined? We have some local realty groups, this is a good question, that manage short-term rentals. Are they considered a platform?
Booking services are defined in the bill.
Yeah, we'll read it out here. It's at the bottom of page 2 going into page 3. Is a person or entity who directly or indirectly provides one or more online computer or application-based platforms that individually or collectively can be used to list or advertise offers for short-term rentals of short-term rental units. And either accept such offers or reserve or pay for such rentals, and charges, collects, or receives a fee for the use of such a platform or the provision of any service. So, by that measure, as long as it's not done purely on paper and in person, they would probably meet that definition.
Okay, all right. We're gonna take 2 more. We're gonna keep this chat open and try to get back to some of you on these questions. One thing I will say is that on February 11th at the Renaissance in Albany, we're going to be doing in the afternoon another in-person session on this with the senators, with everybody on this panel. We're trying to put that together now. So we'll have some information going out on that. But I will just take a second here. There are so many. I mean, we could go on until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which we know people's time. But we will get these printed out. Can you clarify the comment from Senator Hinchey, where I think she just said the state has redefined the definition of hotel to include short-term rentals? counties need to amend their local laws to include short-term rentals, which we've kind of been over. If it's not in the law already, you would have to have that added at the local level, local law. And there was one other one. It was pretty, gee, I scrolled down too far. Can we go over one more time the fee, Ryan, on the registration to help pay for the
Yeah,
the working of the registration?
it's going to be county by county specific. So and some counties may elect not to implement a fee even though it's costing them money, right? But the county has the authority if they want to. And it's defined in the bill. I think it's like reasonable and
Actual and necessary expenses.
reasonable, actual, and necessary expenses. So
So we
go
did
ahead,
get a
Beth.
question earlier up in the chat. I saw asking about, what if you collect too much? Again, because you're going to sort of be backing into this fee, I don't think that that's going to be, really a concern. I think what you're going to do is create some estimates around this is the personnel, even if you're using a third-party vendor, it's going to be, this is the contract amount. This is the person who's going to oversee the contract, their, reasonable and necessary salary and fringe for that time, as well as your enforcement of the registry. So you're going to do some estimates back of the envelope. It may be, looking at that you say, okay, well, I could collect $500 and maybe still not meet all of my costs. But you're going to try to back into that number based on estimates.
One more, Deb, I'm going to kick this over to you because is the bungalow exemption now void? I know we've been over that. In addition, is the exemption that occupancy tax is exempt on 3 or less cottages also void? I know if you want to cover the bungalow for sure.
Sure, yeah. So I can send that language along to you in the chat, but yes, it does. It does undo the buckle rule.
Okay. And we still have some here. We'll get to those and try to get back to the people if we can with an email with an answer. But again, I would encourage you, we'll send out some more information February 11th here in Albany. We're going to do an in-person session. We can continue this dialogue. As Ryan said, this will be the first of many that I'm sure, and we had some great questions, but hopefully we were able to clarify some of the big questions. And the last slide there had my contact information as well as Steven's, and we can get the questions answered as the best as we can. But I'd like to thank all of you for being on. I hope it was worth your time. And again, we'll send out some information on February 11th. And I thank all of you on the call for being a part of the process, the counties, the legislators, the lobby firms to get us to this point. And it won't be smooth sailing for everybody getting them up and running, but it gives the opportunity to make sure that we have a level playing field, as the senator said, and the collection of those taxes helping your counties, helping the tourism promotion agencies to be able to do more work on bringing more people in. I think that was our main goal, was to level the playing field also for our hotel members who were competing unfairly for all those years. So I thank you all for being on. Everybody who is here is going to get a recording sent to them via email. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.